जी, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. To you all and related Eid Mubarak as well. ठीक है जी, आई होप कि आप लोगों की ईद खैर खैरियत से और अच्छी गुजर गई होगी और हर तरह से खैरियत भी गई होगी इंशाल्लाह। अच्छा जी, तो अभी today I will do the development of the skull जो रह गया था उस दिन as far as the gross anatomy was concerned. उस दिन meninges और dural venous sinuses हम लोग कर रहे थे, तो I will complete that in due course of time. You can get plenty of time before your second substage. आपकी first substage मैंने check की थी, the short essay questions, and as usual, there was 100% attempt of copying and pasting from either Google or from the video, mainly Google. ठीक है, so ठीक है, मुझे पता चल गया किस किसने क्या किया था, and I will deal with you all in due course of time. अभी कर रहे हो बेटा, एग्जाम में तो नहीं कर सकते ना, so that's okay. So we have already done the bones of the skull. हमने इनको बहुत डिटेल में स्टडी किया था, ठीक है, रिवाइज these bones with you here last time, and this is just to tell you that this part of the skull, ठीक है, जिसमें ये skull का है, and these bones, frontal parietal, temporal, occipital, sphenoid, they make up a protective case around the brain. So इस part के अंदर brain है, and these bones make a case around the protective आप कह लें, apparatus कह लें या whatever around the skull. जबकि this part of the skull, the interior of the skull, the cranial cavity, ये parts में frontal bones, ethmoid, sphenoid, lesser wings, body, greater wings, ये temporal bone, squamous temporal bone, petrous temporal bone, और ये सारी occipital bone. All these bones, they make up the area of the skull, interior of the skull, on which the brain is resting. The brain is lying over here. इसके ऊपर पड़ा हुआ है, ठीक है? It is, the brain is resting on this part of the skull. Okay? मैं ये इसलिए बता रही हूँ क्योंकि अब इन दोनों पार्ट्स की डेवलपमेंट डिफरेंट है. ओके, डेवलपमेंट की बात कर लेते हैं. The skull develops from mesenchyme around the brain. ठीक है, तो the brain, developing brain is surrounded by mesenchyme, and this mesenchyme then, under the inductive influence of the developing brain induces the overlying mesenchyme to develop into the skull. अब skull या cranium, जिसको भी आप कहें, जो भी आप, cranium is that part of the skull that forms that surrounds the brain. ठीक है, उसको हम दो में डिवाइड करते हैं, न्यूरोक्रेनियम और विसरोक्रेनियम. न्यूरोक्रेनियम वो पार्ट है that makes up a protective case for brain. ठीक है, और इस न्यूरोक्रेनियम जो है ये दो पार्ट्स में दो तरह डेवलप करती है. It develops, part of it develops by intramembranous ossification, and part of the neurocranium develops by endochondral ossification. दूसरा पार्ट है viscerocranium. Viscerocranium is that part that develops into the skeleton of the face. Face के जो bones हैं, they are called viscerocranials, and similarly they are also developed by two processes. Part of the skeleton of the face develops by intramembranous ossification, and part of the skeleton of the face develops by endochondral ossification. अभी in detail ये हम सारा कुछ डिस्कस कर लेते हैं. अच्छा जी, let's start with the neurocranium. And by neurocranium, I mean ये सारा part, ये that forms a protective case around the skull. अब ये जो है ना न्यूरोक्रेनियम, आपको बताया था कि part of it develops in cartilage by intracartilaginous ossification. ये जो bones of the base of skull, ये bones सारी, the bones on which the brain is resting, ये developed by endochondral ossification या intracartilaginous ossification. That means first a cartilaginous model is formed and then ossification takes place in this cartilaginous model. So I am talking about this part of the skull. Okay? Bones of the base of the skull developed by in cartilage. Therefore, it is called chondrocranium. Chondro means cartilage, chondrocranium, because they develop in cartilage. First, cartilaginous model is formed, and then ossification takes place in this cartilaginous model. And then, ये जो neurocranium है, part of it develops in membrane, intramembranous. अब ये जो skull की flat bones हैं, frontal, parietal, occipital, temporal, and sphenoid. Later wing of sphenoid, even the lesser wing. ठीक है? ये जो vault की skulls हैं, they make up the vault. ये सारा जो है, ये vault of the skull है. So the flat bones that make up the vault of the skull, they develop by intramembranous. बेटा as a rule ये है कि whenever protection or support is required, those bones develop by intramembranous ossification, because this is a quick type of ossification in which the mesenchyme is directly converted into a cartilaginous model. Into bone, no cartilage is formed. Mesenchyme directly develops into bone, and so they provide protection to the developing brain. ठीक है? जबकि ये जो part है, इसके ऊपर तो the bone is just resting on this part, so उसमें कोई as such protection required नहीं है. इसमें strength is required because the weight of the bone has to be supported by these bones. So these bones develop by intracartilaginous model ossification. That means first a cartilaginous model is formed, and then this cartilaginous model undergoes ossification. आगे चलते हैं जी, न्यूरोक्रेनियम की ही बात किए लेते हैं, but we first talk about the bones that develop in cartilage. ठीक है? We call that chondrocranium. So दूसरे लफ्जों में ये कि we were talking about these bones on which the brain is resting, bones that make up the base of the skull, all these bones. ठीक है? One by one. I'm sorry. अच्छा बेटा, अब these bones that make up the base of the skull, they are formed as multiple bones. Okay? Several cartilages. Since multiple bones make up the base of the skull, ये देख लीजिए, frontal, ethmoid, sphenoid in pink, yellow में temporal और ये purple में occipital. Since multiple bones make up the base of the skull, that means कि multiple cartilages पहले develop की थी, and then these cartilages separately they underwent ossification, endochondral ossification, and then fusion of these bones occur. अब ये जो डेवलपमेंट ऑफ द बेस ऑफ स्कल है ये बड़ी एक ऑर्डरली सीक्वेंस में डेवलप होती है. पहले starting from the posterior end to the anterior end, that is occipital bone, then the sphenoid, body of the sphenoid, ये part सारा, and then the ethmoid, ये yellow वाला, this is the ethmoid bone. Okay, once again I repeat, occipital bone, this part, then the body of the sphenoid, ये part, and then midline में ये ethmoid bone. In this particular sequence, ये develop होते हैं, starting from posterior to the anterior aspect. ये this part would develop into occipital. Over here, you would have the body of the sphenoid, and then comes the ethmoid over here. Here जो है ये ethmoid. अच्छा जी. अब let's start with these cartilages कि ये होता कैसे. बेटा ये जो cartilages हैं ना, they develop as median या midline cartilages हैं ये, and then they are lateral cartilages. 3 pairs of midline cartilages, one on either side, and 4 pairs of lateral cartilages. ठीक है, one by one हम चलते हैं. The midline या median cartilages में ये देख लीजिए, trabecally crani, ये these are the trabecally crani. ये जो है ये hypophyseal cartilages हैं, and then this is the paracaudal cartilage, one on either side. ये बेटा notochord है running in the center. This is the notochord. ठीक है, मैं फिर नाम रिपीट कर देती हूँ midline cartilages के. ये midline में trabecally crani, hypophyseal cartilage, and then one on either side of the notochord ये है paracaudal cartilages. ये lateral cartilages हैं, इसका लेबल नहीं किया हुआ, but this is the nasal capsule. अच्छा, एक बात याद रख लीजिए कि ये जो lateral cartilages हैं ना, they develop around the sense organs. आपकी you have 5 senses, ठीक है? So around the sense organs, ये nasal cartilage है, ये ala orbitalis है, देख लीजिए ala orbitalis है, ये ala temporalis है, and this is the otic capsule या periotic capsule, दोनों नाम सही है. मैं lateral cartilages को repeat कर देती हूँ. This is nasal capsule, ala orbitalis, ala temporalis, and this is the hypophyseal. This is the otic capsule. Hypophyseal ये है बेटा, वो midline cartilage में आ जाए. Sorry. And this is the otic या periotic capsule, जो भी आप नाम लेना चाहें. So these are the names of cartilages. अब इनका source क्या है development का? ठीक है? Obviously mesenchyme से तो develop हो रही है, but where does the mesenchyme come from? because दो sources हैं mesenchyme के. Part of it develops from neural crest and part of it develops from paraxial mesoderm. Okay? अच्छा जी. अब ये जो है ना बेटा, this is the cranial or the rostral limit of notochord. ठीक है? ये तकरीबन this is at the level of the pituitary gland. और आपको पता है कि pituitary gland is lying in the pituitary fossa. So approximately this is the place where you have the pituitary fossa. So the area in front of the, or the area anterior to the pituitary fossa, this develops, ये सारा blue में जो है, this develops from neural crest. So neural crest cells say this area in front of the pituitary fossa, या cranial end of the notochord, and the area in red, area posterior to the pituitary fossa, or the area posterior to the cranial or rostral limit of notochord. This develops from paraxial mesoderm. और ये जो बिल्कुल posterior part वाला जो area है, this one, ये sclerotome से आता है. कौन से sclerotomes? The occipital, the cranial mode sclerotomes. अब आपको sclerotomes का पता है, ठीक है? Paraxial mesoderm थी, उससे somites develop. If you remember, paraxial mesoderm से sclerotome, myotome, dermatome. हर segment जो है that was divided into sclerotome, myotome, dermatome. Sclerotome से bones बनी थी, myotome से muscle बने थे, and dermatome से उस area की ovuline skin develop हुई थी. So जो occipital region के sclerotomes हैं, plus the paraxial mesoderm. Paraxial mesoderm say all this area in red, and this gray part develops from occipital sclerotomes. So mesenchyme that develops into the base cartilages of the base of skull. This mesenchyme is contributed by neural crest cells, cranial to, anterior to the pituitary fossa, anterior to the rostral limit of notochord over here. That corresponds to the level of pituitary gland, the pituitary fossa. And posterior to this limit is this part of these cartilages developed from paraxial mesoderm. And this part develops from occipital somites. Do you have any questions so far? Any questions? Okay, fine. Good, that means कि आपको समझ आ गई है. अच्छा जी, अब न्यूरल crest जो हैं वो किन cartilages में develop करते हैं? Neural crest cells midline में ये trabecular crani and hypophyseal cartilage. So इस line से आगे approximately this was the site where you have this is the cranial limit of notochord. ठीक है? So anterior to this part, these cartilages, all these cartilages develop from neural crest cells. Blue में देख लीजिए, ठीक है? That means कि median cartilages में से trabecular crani और hypophyseal cartilage ये neural crest से develop की है, और lateral cartilages में से nasal capsule, ala orbitalis, ala temporalis ये develop किया into, they develop from neural crest cells. The mesenchyme that make up these cartilages comes from neural crest. अब आ जाते हैं paraxial mesoderm कौन सी cartilages develop. So posterior to this line, these cartilages develop from paraxial mesoderm. इन cartilages के नाम बता दो. Midline cartilages में just one paracarotid cartilage, और lateral cartilages में से otic capsule. So one midline cartilage, one lateral cartilage. ठीक है? Okay. Up, let's do the cartilages of chondrocranium. ठीक है, cartilages that make up the base of the skull. मीडियन कार्टिलेजेस में से ये देख लीजिए, ठीक है, मीडियन कार्टिलेजेस में से क्या क्या होगा? ट्रबैकुलर क्रैनी, ये हाइपोफिजियल कार्टिलेज, पैराकॉर्डियल कार्टिलेज, ये ट्रबैकुलर क्रैनी, ये हाइपोफिजियल कार्टिलेज और ये इधर पैराकॉर्डियल कार्टिलेज, ठीक है. These cartilages fuse in the midline and they make up a long plate, a long midline plate of cartilages. ये सारी तीन cartilages, one trabecular crani, hypophyseal cartilage and paracardial cartilages, they join together and make up a long plate of cartilages. अब ये नोट कर लीजिए कि this long plate of cartilages जो है ये start करता है from the region of the nose and run back to the foramen magnum. ये foramen magnum है ना, so starting from the nose, nasal region से start होके they run in the midline and go as far as the anterior border of the foramen magnum. Okay, अब इनका फेट क्या है एक एक करके डिस्कस कर लेते हैं. बेटा अब इन बोन्स में जो ossification है ना, that starts in third month. अभी तक we are still talking of the bones that develop from intracartilaginous ossification. So हम basically base of the inside of the base of the skull की बात कर रहे हैं, इस एरिया की, ठीक है. अब थर्ड मंथ में ossification स्टार्ट होती है. ये trabecular crani, over here this diagram is taken from Lyman, ये KLM की drawing है. So the trabecular crani, this develops into the ethmoid bone. ये trabecular crani जो है this develops into ethmoid. In other words, ये वाली जो center में bone है ये एथमोइड है, ये क्रिस्टा गेलाई है और इसके साइड पे दोनों साइड्स पे ये जो है क्रिब्रिफॉर्म प्लेट ऑफ द एथमोइड. क्रिब्रिफॉर्म मींस सिव लाइक, जिस तरह छलनी होती है इसमें मल्टीपल सुराख होते हैं. सो दिस इज द क्रिब्रिफॉर्म प्लेट ऑफ द एथमोइड, ये ठीक है. सो दिस trabecular crani develops into the ethmoid, this cartilage. Then comes the hypophyseal cartilage. Immediately posterior to it is the hypophyseal cartilage. ये वाली, approximately ये वाली जो है ये hypophyseal cartilage है. Hypophyseal cartilage तकरीबन ये वाली जो है, the hypophyseal cartilage develops into body of the sphenoid. ये वाला part. Hypophysis is the pituitary gland. Pituitary gland is also called hypophysis ciliae. Okay, so the pituitary gland is lodged over here in the hypophyseal fossa या pituitary fossa. ये एक depressed सा fossa है. ये anterior clinoid process है, ये और ये posterior clinoid process है. इधर ये जो part है, this lodges the pituitary fossa. Since it lodges the hypophysis cerebri या pituitary fossa, this is hence called the hypophyseal cartilage, because this develops into the pituitary fossa, body of sphenoid. Body of sphenoid में pituitary fossa पड़ा हुआ है. So this part develops from hypophyseal cartilage. And then comes these paracardial cartilage. ये वाली, ये paracardial cartilage है midline में. ये इधर paracardial cartilages है. Paracardial cartilages forms this part of the occipital bone, base of the occipital bone. ये वाला, ठीक है. ये part जो है ये स्क्लेरोटोन, ये जो है ना, ये स्क्लेरोटोन्स है, occipital sclerotones. ठीक है, so this part develops from occipital sclerotones. In other words, the paracaudal cartilages, ये plus the cartilages that develop from occipital sclerotome, all these cartilages, they make up this part, the occipital bone, जिसमें base of the occipital bone आ जाता है and squamous part of the occipital bone. तो base of the skull जो है वो इससे बनता है, paracaudal cartilages plus occipital sclerotomes. एक दफा फिर बता देती हूँ, ossification 3rd month में होती है and as a result of that the trabecular cranny that develops into this bone which is the ethmoid, the hypophyseal cartilages, ये जो cartilages हैं occipital sclerotomes. ओके, आगे चलते हैं. Any questions so far? नहीं है. अच्छा जी. So let's talk about the laterally placed cartilage. Nasal capsule, ala orbitalis, ala temporalis, and otic capsule या periotic capsule, आप जो भी इसमें कहना चाहें. Let's talk about these cartilages, and I told you earlier on that these laterally placed cartilages are associated with sense organs. So nose, sense organs में आपके eyes हैं, nose हैं, hearing is a sense. So अब इनके नाम मैं फिर रिपीट कर रही हूँ. नेजल कैप्सूल, पता नहीं इस नेजल कैप्सूल को इन्होंने लेबल क्यों नहीं किया. 2 on this side and 2 on this side. Nasal capsule, ala orbitalis, ala temporalis, and otic capsule या periotic capsule, whatever you want to call it. अब इन lateral cartilages का fate क्या है? The nasal capsule यहाँ से start करते हैं, बिल्कुल. Nasal capsule in the midline over here. ये the nasal capsules, they develop around the nose, nasal sac. Nasal sac, nose starts to develop from the nasal sac. Nasal sac के गिर्द जो bone develop होती है, that is the ethmoid. Okay, so this bone around the nasal capsule is the ethmoid. Over here, यहाँ पे ये ethmoid around the nasal sac. ठीक है. अच्छा, ala orbitalis की बात कर रहे हैं. Next cartilage is ala orbitalis. Orbit, ठीक है, that means it is related to the eye. So this develops into the lesser wing of sphenoid, this bone. Lesser wing of sphenoid becomes part of the orbit. Then comes the ala temporalis. Ala temporalis develops into this bone, the greater wing of sphenoid. ये सारी जो bone है, this is the greater wing of sphenoid, और ये बेटा, this is the lesser wing of sphenoid. ये body of the sphenoid थी जो midline cartilage से develop हो रही थी. Lateral cartilages में ala orbitalis develops into lesser wing of sphenoid. Ala temporalis develops into greater wing of sphenoid. ठीक है. And then comes the otic capsules या periotic capsules. Periotic capsules का मतलब है कि they, otic is anything to do with the ears. ठीक है. So otic capsule develops around the ear, developing ear, otic vesicle figure, and that develops into the petrous part of temporal bone, yeah, and this mastoid part, ये mastoid process है. So the periotic capsule, that means this cartilage. दूसरे लफ्जों में this cartilage, this periotic, ये petrous temporal bone है, ये सारी, ठीक है. So the periotic capsule develops into the part of the temporal bone. ठीक है बच्चे. अच्छा, अब what happens is कि once these bones, midline bones be these, once these cartilages, they undergo ossification and develop into bones, these bones then fuse with each other. ठीक है, इसलिए different colors में दिखाना है. All these bones fuse with each other, and अब आप ये देख लीजिए, हर एक की एक different shape है. They are fitting well into each other, and where they fit well, they form sutures or fissures where they fit into each other, and then there are places where the shape is such that one bone does not fit well with the other bone. So where gaps are left in between bones, these gaps either develop into foramina, openings, या फिर fissures. ये देख लीजिए, ठीक है. Where they fit well, वहाँ sutures develop हो रहे हैं. लेकिन when they don't fit well into each other, gaps are, and these gaps develop into foramen. ठीक है. Any questions? No questions? सब समझ में आ गया? If you are listening. Okay, fine. अगर आ गया समझ तो बहुत अच्छी बात. Okay जी. So अब हम let's discuss. अभी तक हमने vault base of the skull discuss किया. The part of the skull on which the brain is resting. Brain इसके ऊपर पड़ा हुआ है. So this part of the skull has to bear weight. Brain का वजन इस part ने बर्दाश्त करना है, इसलिए this needs to be a solid structure. Okay. Now let's come to the membranous neurocranium, that part of the skull that forms a protective case. That means the vault of the skull की बात कर रहे हैं. अब ये जो vault of the skull है ना, this also develops by membranous ossification. इसलिए क्योंकि आपको बताया है whatever areas in the body they need protection या to support. Clavicle is the first bone to develop by intramembranous ossification. इसकी वजह ये है कि it connects the axial to the appendicular skeleton, और इसने वजन बर्दाश्त करना है appendicular skeleton का. That is why. ठीक है. So अब इसकी भी वही दो sources हैं, न्यूरल क्रेस्ट सेल से भी और पैराक्सियल मेसोडर्म से भी. So ये जो देख लीजिए, ये ग्रेज एनाटॉमी की ड्राइंग है, ये लैंगमैन की है. ठीक है. द ग्रीन पार्ट, डार्क ग्रीन पार्ट, ये न्यूरल क्रेस्ट से है, और ये जो लाइटर पार्ट है ये सारा, दिस इज ऑल अ पैराक्सियल मेसेंकाइम. जबकि ये डार्क जो है ना, ये वाला, ये स्क्लेरोटॉम से आता है. अभी इसकी बात कर लेते हैं. ठीक है. So the mesenchyme आपको बताया था, this surrounds the brain, invests the brain, and develops into bones by the process of intramembranous ossification. अच्छा जी. So welcome back, internet. Brain is surrounded by mesenchyme. In mesenchyme, say this mesenchyme surrounding the brain develops into the flat bones of the skull. अब ये कैसे बनती हैं कि to begin with small dots of ossification begins. Bone के spicules small, ये देख लीजिए इस तरह star shaped areas जिनमें bone develop होती है. एक प्राइमरी ऑसिफिकेशन सेंटर है, उससे ये एरियाज ऑफ ऑसिफिकेशन रेडिएट आउट करते हैं एंड स्प्रेड फ्रॉम द सेंटर टुवर्ड्स द पेरिफेरी. एक सेंटर से शुरू होके bone formation begins, and from the center point it begins to radiate away from the center point. ठीक है, सेंटर से पेरिफेरी की तरफ bone formation जो है that begins to form. फिर adjacent areas में you have bone formations, then these different areas they approach each other, they fuse with each other, and finally you have one whole area where, sorry, you have multiple bones forming like this, and these bones approach each other, and between these bones sutures are formed. ये each other, and between them suture is formed. Similarly, this bone approaches this bone. Up, how does the bone grow? New layers of bone are formed outside, and on the inside of the skull, bone is resorbed. So the osteoclasts eat up the bone from inside, and on the other hand, more bone is laid on the outside by the osteoblastic activity. Okay? So that is how the skull grows in size. So this is simply to tell you the sources of mesenchyme. This all in blue develops by neural crest cells, and in red all this develops from paraxial mesoderm, jabke over here this part develops from occipital sclerotons. आगे बात कर देते हैं इसकी. So न्यूरोक्रेनियम, मेम्ब्रेनस न्यूरोक्रेनियम की हम बात किए लेते हैं. अच्छा जी, अब बात ये है कि मेम्ब्रेनस न्यूरोक्रेनियम से तो बोन्स ऑफ द वॉल्ट ऑफ स्कल बन गई. बट रिमेंबर वन थिंग कि ये जो बोन्स ऑफ द वॉल्ट ऑफ स्कल है, दे approach each other but do not fuse with each other. Yes, they are connected to each other by fibrous connective tissue, and there are in between them you have sutures. But then there are places in the skull where the bones, they don't even approach each other, इनके दरमियान gaps रह जाते हैं. These gaps are filled by simply by connective tissue membranes. Bones do not approach each other. So these gaps that are left in between bones of the vault of the skull, these gaps are called fontanelle. Yeah. These are called fontanelle. So you have an anterior fontanelle, you have posterior fontanelle over here, you have an anterolateral fontanelle, you have a posterolateral fontanelle. ठीक है. अब ये कहाँ कहाँ होते हैं? ये जो fontanelle है ना, anterior fontanelle is between the two frontal bones and the two parietal bones. इनके दरमियान ये diamond shaped area है between the two frontal bones and between the two parietal bones. These four bones meet, should have met over here, लेकिन इनके दरमियान gap रह जाता है, this diamond shaped area. This is called anterior fontanelle. This is an extremely important area because this area में, this is a large diamond shaped area that remains open till 18 months of age, postnatal, after birth of the 1.5 year, 1.5 to 2 years. This remains open. The bones do not meet. This is important. Going on the inside of the skull. Say, for example, if the baby is dehydrated, has been vomiting a lot, or has developed diarrhea, lost a lot of fluid, this membrane that bridges the gap between these four bones, this membrane sink down. ठीक है? So depress हो जाती है ये, anterior fontanelle depress हो जाता है. If the baby is overhydrated या God forbid अंदर किसी वजह से कोई ट्यूमर डेवलप हो गया या सर में चोट लग गई है एंड उसकी वजह से ब्लड अंदर है, so the cranial cavity की bones तो expand नहीं करती है बेटा. The bones once formed, once sutures, so when the intracranial pressure rises for any reason, this fontanelle, this then bulges out. ठीक है. Posterior fontanelle जो है over here between the occipital bone and the posterior end of the parietal bone. So parietal bone at the anterior end forms a boundary of the anterior fontanelle, and at the posterior end parietal bones they form a boundary of the posterior fontanelle. Posterior fontanelle earlier close कर जाता है, 1 year close कर जाता है, up to 1 year. ठीक है, 6 months to 1 year में close कर जाता है. This is the most important. उसके अलावा we have anterolateral. This is between the lower end of the parietal bone, the frontal bone, and this is the temporal bones. Okay, mastoid part of the temporal bone, and this is the posterolateral. Once again, the occipital. But this anterior fontanelle is the most important. अब ये जो fontanelles and the sutures, the fact that the sutures, these bones are very soft. The sutures have not met, they have not fused with each other. They are held together by membranes. This fact is important because during childbirth, these bones, they slide over each other. अगर ये fused होती तो ये slide over नहीं कर सकती. As a result, ये जो frontal bones हैं, they become depressed when they are part at time of childbirth. These bones become depressed. जबकि posterior में ये जो occipital bones, they protrude out like this. और ये जो parietal bones हैं, they side to side ये get compressed. So the poor child, when he or she is born, ये अजीब सी skull का shape हो जाता है. This is because of the fact that molding occurs, and because of this anterior fontanelle, molding becomes easy. ये जो process है by which the frontal bones become depressed, the occipital bones protrude out, and the parietal bones compressed side to side compression हो जाती है. This process is called molding. अब ये जो sutures है ना, they remain open. Open in the fact कि fibrous membrane बन जाती है. The membrane obviously इस तरह पहले थी intrauterine life में. It is not that. इसमें connective tissues में fibrous tissue develop हो जाता है, but fusion नहीं होती. Even adults में fusion नहीं होती. Old age में, very old age में जाके fusion हो जाती है. अब what happens is कि up to 5 years ये जो skull है, this 2 to 3 years में rapid development है skull की. Up to 5 years उसके बाद जरा slow down कर जाती है, but 5 years में ये develop करते रहती है, and then the development of the increase in size of the skull slows down. ये जाके ये 18 years तक ये grow करती रहती है, but very slow. The growth is very slow. अब आ जाते हैं जी pharyngeal arches. क्या होती हैं pharyngeal arches? अभी हमने pharyngeal arches की नहीं है. Pharyngeal arches pharynx, ठीक है, developing pharynx. हमने pharynx की development की थी. अब developing pharynx is surrounded by mesenchyme. ये इसके अंदर ये सारा pharynx है, and it is surrounded by mesenchyme. ये सारा mesenchyme है. अब ये mesenchyme surrounding the pharynx, this develops into a bars of cartilage. ये bars में develop होता है. इस तरह चॉकलेट का बार होता है ना, या रॉड कह लें, ठीक है. So ये mesenchyme around the developing pharynx, this develops into bars. अब ये इस तरह develop होता है कि from posterior to the anterior end. It surrounds the pharynx from posterior to the anterior end. These bars of bone, 6 bars develop करते हैं, ठीक है. और इस तरह से develop करते हैं. The first is the first to develop, then this is second arch, then the third arch, and total 6 arches develop होती हैं. ये this is how it develops. First arch, second arch, third arch. Okay, this is the mouth. Developing mouth. Okay. This is just to show you what things are. The mandible. This is the maxilla. ठीक है ना? ये इधर zygomatic arch है ये. This is the hyoid bone. Greater horn. ये lesser horn है. ये body of the hyoid bone है. Okay. This is how the hyoid bone is placed. ये larynx है. This part is the larynx. The thyroid cartilage is part of the larynx. Yeah. And resting on the larynx, this is the hyoid bone. In fact, hyoid bone is separated from the larynx by this the thyroid cartilage and a beta. So thyrohyoid membrane. So hyoid bone is not in direct contact with the larynx. दरमियान में ये membrane आ जाती है. ये ligaments देख लीजिए, thyrohyoid, stylohyoid है, ये styloid process है. इसके बारे में आपने इतनी कहानियां लिखी थी. Parotid gland के अंदर embedded है styloid process structures. सारे मसल्स के नाम जो हमने अभी किए ही नहीं, वो सब कुछ आपने लिख दिया. Thank you very much. I very gladly cancelled out everything. Okay, ठीक है. So this is what I wanted to show you. Body of the hyoid bone. This is the greater horn, and these are the scene जो है ये lesser. Okay, आगे चलते हैं. अब let's come to viscerocranium. Viscerocranium मैंने आपको बताया था दूसरा face. So the cartilage that surround the face. अब face जिन bones से बनता है, they develop by 2 processes. वही some bones develop by intramembranous ossification, and some bones developed by intracartilaginous ossification. अब mesenchyme जो है neural crest cell से भी है and paraxial mesoderm से भी है. One by one हम ये देखते हैं कि किस pharyngeal arch से क्या बनता है. First pharyngeal arch की बात कर लेते हैं. मैंने आपको बताया था कि we have 6 pharyngeal arches. अब जो first pharyngeal arch है इस 2 में डिवाइड होती है, maxillary prominence और mandibular prominence. ये दोनों first arch की parts है. अब I told you, let's go back. ये जो pharyngeal arch है posterior end से शुरू होती हैं ये और anterior end तक surrounding going around the pharynx, posterior end से शुरू होके anterior end तक आ जाती है. They surround the pharynx. So it has a dorsal end and over here it would have a ventral end. ठीक है. अच्छा, अब फर्स्ट आर्च की दो होती है, एक मैक्सिलरी प्रोमिनेंस एंड ये मैंडिबुलर प्रोमिनेंस. इनकी नाम आपको बता देते हैं. अब फर्स्ट आर्च से डेवलप होती है 2 bones related to the ear, मिडल ear की 2 bones. कौन सी 2 bones? incus और मेनियस. ये मिडिल एयर कैविटी की 2 बोन्स है और इसका रिलेटेड अच्छा सेकेंड कार्टिलेज आर्च की जो है उससे कार्टिलेज कौन सी डेवलप होती है? पोस्टीरियर एंड या डोर्सल एंड से स्टेपीज. styloid process is part of the temporal bone. ठीक है. So stapes, styloid process और ventral end पे lesser horn of the hyoid bone and upper half of the body of the hyoid bone. मैं फिर repeat कर देती हूँ. The bones that develop by intracartilaginous ossification, viscerocranium की मतलब फेस की वो bones that develop by intracartilaginous ossification. Second arch posterior से शुरू होके anterior पे चले. Posterior थी stapes. Stapes is the third bone of the middle ear cavity. 2 हमने पहले की थी जो first arch से थी, incus और medius first arch की bones थी. अब second arch, the third bone of the middle ear cavity, stapes. Then comes the styloid process. Next is the ventral end of the cartilage, जिससे lesser horn of the hyoid bone and upper half of the body of the hyoid bone. Third arch brown में देखिए, ये आपकी KLM की ड्राइंग है. Third arch is in brown. Third arch develops into this greater horn and lower half of the body of hyoid bone. ये greater horn and lower half of the body of hyoid bone. ये सब bones developed by intracartilaginous ossification. अब कौन सी बोन है जो इंट्रामेम्ब्रेनस ऑसिफिकेशन से डेवलप होती है? बेटा याद रखिएगा ना, इंट्रामेम्ब्रेनस ऑसिफिकेशन से वो है दैट प्रोवाइड प्रोटेक्शन. ठीक है. सो अब अगर आप इन अ सीक्वेंस देखते जाइए, इंट्रामेम्ब्रेनस फर्स्ट आर्च को मैं आपको बताया था, एक मैक्सिलरी प्रोमिनेंस है लाइट ग्रीन में देखिए, और एक मैंडिबुलर प्रोमिनेंस है, मैक्सिलरी प्रोमिनेंस है, मैक्सिला zygomatic bone, And then this is the squamous part of the temporal bone. Squamous part of the temporal bone starts to develop as a bone of the viscerocranium. That means face ki bone ke taur pe it starts to develop, but then it is pulled back posteriorly and becomes part of the bones of the skull. Okay, but intramembranous ossification जो bones of the skull में होती है, sorry, bones of the face में intramembranous ossification किन bones में होती है? Maxilla, zygomatic bone, and squamous part of the temporal bone. जबकि mandibular prominence first arch, ठीक है? इसमें the mesenchyme condenses around पहले एक cartilage का मॉडल बनता है, इसको Meckel's cartilage कहते हैं, ठीक है? Then mesenchyme surrounding this Meckel's cartilage develops into the mandible. So mandible develops intramembranous ossification, and then ये जो cartilaginous एक model बना था Meckel's cartilage का, this then degenerates and disappears. So ये जो cartilage बनी थी Meckel's cartilage, God only made this to make way for the mandible to develop around it. ठीक है? Then उसके अलावा first arch में से sphenomandibular ligament बना, ये जो remnants of the cartilage रह गए थे, इससे sphenomandibular ligament बन गया. उसके अलावा mandible में से कुछ parts हैं जो कि endochondral ossification से भी develop होते हैं, that means midline में, chin में, या फिर condyles of the mandible, ये तो cartilaginous develop होते हैं, but by and large mandible develops from by intramembranous ossification. It develops around the Meckel's cartilage. Okay. Mesenchyme around the Meckel's cartilage develops into ये जो dotted line है ये Meckel's cartilage है, ये जो line है this is the Meckel's cartilage. इसको जाने दीजिए. इसकी anomalies I will do day after tomorrow, inshallah. And उसके बाद that won't take time, about half an hour's time. And the rest of the time I will devote to completing the gross anatomy. कि वो जो part रह गया था उसका meninges or ural venous sinuses. Taken for now. Do you have any questions? Anything you want me to repeat? Anything you did not understand? We still have 3 minutes. No, I suppose not. I suppose not. Chilling. In that case, I think we will wind up. Next time we do the anomalies of the developing skull. Please, आपके test में, आपके upcoming embryology के test में, you have body cavities, you have development of cardiovascular system, and the development of urinary system, and development of genital system, male and female genital system. So it is urogenital system, cardiovascular system, and body cavities. ये 3 आपके topics हैं for your embryology test. Okay, then Khuda Hafiz and see you. Yeah.